This month we celebrated the 140th anniversary of our commander Garagin Inzde's birth, as well as the 93rd anniversary of the Chegakron Covenants he founded just a few days ago. We often present ourselves as that young national political movement that not only preaches Inzde's ideas, but also brings them back to life in the 21st century. Of course, there have been many organizations and parties that have presented themselves in Inzde's name to gain authority and show that they are supposedly patriotic or nationalist. But the overwhelming majority of them, if not all, have had no connection at all with nationalism, and especially with Inzde's ideology. Unfortunately, over the years, these various organizations have devalued and continue to devalue Inzde's ideas, because they have as much to do with Segakronism as we have to do with ballet. Therefore, I think it would be right to talk a little today about Inzde and his struggle, so that there is no misunderstanding and everyone understands how we perceive all that and why it is of very important significance for us. This will also help us understand not only the importance of having a leader in our days, but also its necessity. In the last 20 years especially, many of us have spoken about Inzde and quoted his words, given speeches and made toasts in his honor, as well as voiced countless words of praise addressed to him. But I think a very tiny percentage has understood Inzde's true essence and realized his uniqueness for our modern history. Many have a superficial idea of who Inzde really was, and by constantly exalting his image, they think he was a demigod or a superman. But the amazing thing is precisely that he was just a man who could not perform miracles, regardless of the fact that he had a divine and supernatural will. He was not a hero sitting on a white horse with a magic wand, as many imagine. No matter how much we love, respect, and exalt our prophet commander, we must understand that he did not appear out of thin air to save Siunik and thereby also our homeland from dismemberment. He did all that and achieved success solely thanks to hard work, sacrifices, and an organized, consistent struggle. Over the years, he went from village to village and turned simple peasants and workers into soldiers and united them. Inzde has shown us what an Aryan man can do when he has an unbreakable will and unwavering faith in our victory. This is the main reason why for us Inzde is not only a hero and an exemplary military and political figure, but also a standard of greatness. Because in this modern age, no other Armenian has served the power of cosmic life, the creative process, more than he has. Unlike other heroes of his time, Inzde didn't just create a new ideology. Through his personal example, he became the very embodiment of that ideology. Because of this, he is not just a military figure, but more importantly, an ideological, political, and spiritual figure as well. He laid the foundation of Armenian nationalism for us in the modern era of our history, and as I mentioned earlier, our goal is to carry his work forward into this new millennium, building a nation-state based on national values. This is our movement's vision of Garagin Inzde, his ideas, his activities, and his struggle. But in our country, as I've said, there are people with a different vision, because while they invoke Inzde's name, they preach ideas that completely contradict his own. Having lived in Armenia for nearly 10 years now, I have to say that I've heard all kinds of madness and unbelievable stories. I've seen people who actually call themselves Chehakrons, while at the same time defending Joseph Stalin. They quote Inzde's words yet remain pro-Soviet or pro-Russian. They speak of nationalism while holding positive views on communism and other such nonsense. Year after year, I noticed more of these contradictions, leading me to realize that only a tiny fraction of those in Armenia who call themselves nationalists or followers of Inzde actually are. The majority are actually neo-Bolsheviks, dressed in national clothing while holding Inzde's book. We saw the best proof of this 2 years ago when we gathered at Inzde's statue to commemorate the 138th anniversary of his birth. Artsakh had just been completely depopulated of Armenians, and the goal of our small gathering and march was not only to celebrate our Sparape's birthday, but also to send a message to our external enemies and traitors that there is a nationalist political movement in Armenia that rejects their anti-Armenian agenda, opposes their violence, and will not tolerate their betrayals. It was a march that shook not only Armenia, but the entire world. That message reached Baku, Ankara, Moscow, and Tel Aviv like a lightning bolt, because in the last 30 years, no other march has struck as much fear into them as ours did. That message showed everyone that the Armenian nation is still resilient and will not be brought to its knees. It showed that there is a force in Armenia that will thwart all their diabolical plans directed against our homeland. However, a massive outcry was raised in our political sphere and media against our gathering and march, even by those who consider themselves nationalists, simply because we gave an Aryan salute at Enjde's statue and shouted, "Always Armenian!" They raised a huge outcry over that, yet didn't make a sound when, just 2 months after our gathering, in Sardarapat, Putin's large, a mural protest took place. For them, giving an Aryan salute at Enjde's statue and shouting, "Always Armenian," is unacceptable. But a protest flattering the Russian president is not only acceptable, but welcome. I can't think of a better example or proof of how anti-national, anti-Armenian, and corrupt our entire political and media field is. After those events, I clearly understood and became convinced that we are truly the only nationalist political movement in Armenia, while our patriotic compatriots who are not neo-Bolsheviks apply Enjde's ideas only in the cultural sphere, whereas we apply them in the political struggle itself, which is a far more important and necessary task. All of our movement's analyses regarding every internal and external issue concerning our nation are made through the lens of Tsegakron. Before taking any position, we always ask ourselves what Enjde would think about this issue or what stance he would take in this case, because only by asking such questions can we move our struggle forward toward victory. This is how we continue to keep Enjde's memory alive in the 21st century, while the fake nationalist neo-Bolsheviks continue to desecrate and discredit his name. Preaching Enjde's ideas in this new century is extremely important to show our nation the right path, but we must realize that people follow leaders who embody those ideas, not the ideas themselves. That's why we see statues and pictures of Enjde everywhere, but never statues and pictures dedicated to the Tsegakron ideology. Enjde was the embodiment of those ideas, and if it weren't for the figure embodying his ideas, we wouldn't have had successes in mountainous Armenia 105 years ago. He showed that in critical times, it's not only important to preach the right ideas, but also to have a leader who embodies those right ideas. He proved that ideas have no value without a leader who carries those ideas forward. Whoever thinks that without a leader with an iron will and determination we can get out of this low and difficult situation doesn't understand human psychology and has learned nothing from human history. In these peaceful and comfortable times, falsehood prevails, and roundtables and debates are more acceptable to the public. But when there's a crisis, people will forget all that and look for a decisive and uncompromising leader, because their natural instincts will awaken. As Enjde said, "A true leader is often not appointed. He emerges when he is needed. He appears in times of danger. In such dangerous and extreme situations, the truth is able to break through the illusion of lies and move forward." However, the problem is that in Armenia's political arena, everyone strives to be a leader and believes they can be one without realizing that leadership brings with it immense responsibility and sacrifice. That's why in these relatively stable and comfortable times, there's no major consolidation around a single leader, especially if that leader is still young. Many young men, due to their egos, fail to understand that there's nothing wrong or demeaning about being a follower. In fact, to be a good leader, one must first be a good follower. Before I entered politics as an unknown repatriate, I was serving as a contract soldier in the frontline positions of Tavush. A couple of years later, I volunteered for the 2020 war and served from start to finish on the front lines of Martakert. Throughout my entire service, both in times of peace and war, I carried out every order from my commanders without hesitation, even if the platoon or company commander was younger than I was. I was born and raised in the United States, received a higher education, and even taught at a university for 3 years, but none of that was ever a reason for me to consider myself superior to my commanders. There wasn't a single duty I didn't perform, no matter how sick I was or how poorly I felt. I had no complexes because in the army I didn't see myself as an individual, but as a small part of the force. And for that force to function properly, every soldier must fulfill their duties with honor, no matter what. Everyone wants to be a leader, but not everyone is willing or ready to walk the heavy and difficult path that leadership requires. Everyone wants to sit on the throne, but no one wants to earn that place through sacrifice and hard, consistent work. Yet only through that path is it possible to make the throne serve the nation, the homeland, and our statehood. Therefore, leadership is not something self-proclaimed. To be a leader, one must first, through the example of their own life and unwavering struggle, prove that their words and ideas are not just empty air, but are built upon clear steps and actions. The nation standing on the brink of destruction cannot survive through uncertainty or half-hearted measures. In times like these, only a national leader can unite the people, restore dignity, and make the difficult decisions necessary to raise the nation and save the homeland. Leadership rooted in patriotism and nationalism turns sorrow into hope, indifference into action, chaos into order, and weakness into strength. Without such a leader, the nation will continue to perish, but with such a leader, the nation can rise from the ashes. By a twist of fate, we once again face the same challenge that our commander-in-chief confronted nearly 100 years ago. Hosank, as well as Armenia's independent statehood, are on the brink of collapse. Therefore, more than ever, we must breathe new life into Njde's ideas in our time. The fact that a man like Njde was born during our homeland's most critical times was proof that Armenia was still viable. It remains for Armenia to once again demonstrate its viability during this most critical period of our history. Only a political struggle endowed with Njde's decisive will and fiery spirit can cleanse our country of this neo-Bolshevik disaster and anti-Armenian phenomenon, which are leading our homeland toward final dismemberment and our nation toward a new genocide. We must put a stop to this entire nation-destroying process. Therefore, we have no alternative. Standing on Njde's shoulders, we must continue his work for the sake of our national values, for the sake of our honor, and for the sake of our nation and sacred land.